Can you smell what The Rock is cooking? Big man, big attitude, and an even bigger heart. Dwayne Johnson, aka The Rock, has had the box office in a chokehold for most of his career, reviving franchises and starring in multi-million-dollar blockbuster movies. Save for a few, of course. In this video, we'll be checking how The Rock has held Hollywood hostage for 10 years straight, including all the years before and after. Stick around to find out why his hold only lasted 10 years and landed him in rock bottom. Early life. Before The Rock became the megastar he's known today, he was simply just Dwayne Johnson. But to say that would be a huge understatement, because Dwayne Johnson was not just some ordinary guy. He was royalty. Wrestling royalty, that is. To put it simply, Dwayne Johnson was born into one of the many royal families in wrestling. Peter Maivia, Dwayne's grandfather, was part of the Bloodline, a Samoan family tree that featured legends such as the Crazy Samoans and former WWE champion Roman Reigns. Dwayne's father also wrestled under the name Rocky Johnson, a legend in the ring, but a bit lacking outside of it. Being a wrestler comes with a price, and that price is time. Dwayne's dad would often be away from his own family, wrestling across the country. And if he wasn't doing wrestling matches, then the family would be dirt poor. This put Dwayne in a lot of trouble, causing him to be a problem child that would steal and fight his way through adolescence. It wasn't until later that Dwayne would find his footing under the mentorship of his high school coach. That's because Dwayne Johnson didn't just get blessed with the family name, he was blessed by genetics too. Dwayne Johnson was built like a truck at an early age, which made him excel in multiple sports. But the one he really fell in love with was college football. Football gave him the discipline to get through life with a level head, and it presented him with a career path he could follow. This was his ticket out of a hard-knock life, eventually landing a scholarship with the University of Miami. But sadly, this plan was a bust. Early on in Dwayne's football career, he ended up with an injured shoulder which benched him for a whole season. Since then, he was never the same. Realizing that this might be a career dead end, he decided to go back to his family roots, wrestling. Dwayne Johnson's father was opposed to the idea at first because he knew firsthand the sacrifices Dwayne would have to make to get into the industry. But as it turns out, being the son and grandson of two wrestling legends looked pretty good on paper, and he was signed to wrestle professionally just a year into his wrestling career. The Rock went through many eras during his time wrestling. First was his Nepo Baby era under the name Rocky Maivia. This was an era where fans absolutely hated him because of how much he was being favored by management. People saw him as an unfair winner just because he had the name Maivia strapped to him. The second era was where he turned into an absolute menace as The Rock. This was a wrestler with attitude, and charming at the same time. The fans ate it up, and movie and TV execs started tuning in too. Let's chokeslam the elephant in the room right now. Yes, wrestling is acting.
But what? But I can't believe you. What?
Dwayne started getting TV deals left and right, starting with a few cameos in That 70s Show and Star Trek Voyager. Then he'd go on to host SNL. Heck, even Roger Ebert, a famous Hollywood critic, vouched for him, saying Dwayne was going to become a big movie star and that he should jump on the earliest opportunity to get his ticket to Hollywood punched. And so he did, starting in his first feature film debut in The Mummy Returns as a horribly CGI'd Scorpion King. But his presence alone made that movie so much more popular, and he'd end up getting his own spin-off movie. But as The Rock grew more into a Hollywood star, the more fans labeled him as a sellout. Instead of backing off Hollywood, he leaned into it and entered his third era, Hollywood Rock. This change made fans love The Rock even more, but it was clear that The Rock had bigger dreams aside from wrestling. Hollywood was calling, and it was time to commit. B-list celebrity. When The Rock's contract with WWF ended in 2004, he chose to let go of the wrestling world and commit all his time to movies. If there's one thing that ties Hollywood and wrestling together, it's that fan reaction matters. And sadly, The Rock wasn't getting much love in his first few movies. His role in Hollywood at the time was to fill the shoes of big-bodied action stars such as Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. But none of his movies saw as much love. Movies like Walking Tall, Doom, and Gridiron Gang were all mediocre films that were a dime a dozen in the movie industry. And so, just like in wrestling, The Rock decided it was time for a new era. The Rock began slimming down his physique and letting go of the tough attitude that he was known for in wrestling, instead choosing to be the gentle giant in family movies such as Disney's The Game Plan in 2007 and Race to Witch Mountain in 2009. This new era family-friendly Rock was more than welcome in the box office, and year by year, The Rock would be building his brand as a household name in movies. He was finally making money, but being family-friendly wasn't all that he brought to the table. It was clear that The Rock was still a tough guy with attitude, and as family-friendly Rock opened the doors to Hollywood, Dwayne Johnson's real persona would make him stay in Hollywood. Franchise Viagra. If you've been sentient for at least 5 years, you would know how big of a franchise Fast and Furious is. This is a franchise that flew over tanks, buildings, and even to space. But one thing that people don't mention enough is how the franchise almost hit rock bottom. Back in 2009, after the mediocre release of Fast and Furious 4, the directors were scratching their heads, thinking of a way to revitalize the movies. There's only so much you can do with cars before things get old, so they needed the franchise to be bigger and badder than ever before. Thankfully, The Rock was the biggest bad that you could get at the time, debuting as the strong and huge, stoic and muscular action hero in 2011's Fast 5. The Rock's star power revived the entire franchise, grossing $86 million on its opening week. The Rock's performance in Fast 5 would cement him as a regular of the franchise, and he would even get his own spin-off movie years in the future. And for years to come, this was what The Rock would symbolize. Journey to the Center of the Earth, G.I. Joe, Jumanji, Baywatch, all franchises that chose The Rock because his presence and star power at the time was so strong that he attracted an audience just by being in the cast. The audience was in love with Dwayne Johnson because his entire brand was Hollywood's tough guy, and he built that brand over years. But sadly, this approach to building a brand backfired. Too tough. Being an actor meant you had to be versatile. The Rock knew this when he was still in wrestling, changing his persona multiple times to win the audience over. But for some reason, this stopped when he went to Hollywood. Being Hollywood's big tough guy meant that he could only be Hollywood's big tough guy. Bit by bit, it started feeling like The Rock was playing the same role year in and year out. In fact, he tried so hard to be Hollywood's tough guy that it was revealed his contract specifies that he couldn't lose any fights. This became a real problem in 2022 on the release of Black Adam, where The Rock's inflated ego and ridiculous contract stipulations made the movie all about him. This was the moment The Rock lost his audience, and all at once his tight grip on Hollywood loosened. Of course, The Rock is still a mega actor today. He still hasn't let go of his Hollywood tough guy persona, making every movie he stars in to be predictable slop. Noticing the decline of his own brand, The Rock went back to his roots and now finds himself comfortably seated back in the wrestling world, a place where his overinflated ego would be celebrated instead of criticized. Only time will tell whether or not The Rock is still capable of bending his own persona, but until then, we'll be waiting for his eventual contract change.